Claire Adams never thought a dog's paw could sound like a warning bell, but that's exactly what it became. An eerie, rhythmic scratch, scratch, scratch. Always at the same time, always in the same corner, always at the same silver suitcase. At first, she laughed it off. "Radar just misses his job," she told Blake, her boyfriend of 6 months. "He's still got that canine itch, poor guy." But the laughter had faded quickly, because Radar, her retired German shepherd, decorated for sniffing out explosives in Iraq and drugs in 2 major cities, wasn't playing. He wasn't bored. He wasn't looking for treats. He was trying to tell her something. It started the first week after she moved in with Blake. The silver suitcase sat in the corner of his home office, padlocked and stacked beneath an old speaker and a dusty college yearbook. Blake said it held old files, maybe some junk from my undergrad years, and Claire didn't think twice. But Radar? He made it his obsession. Every day, like clockwork, the old dog would walk past the suitcase, then double back and stare at it. Then came the pacing, then the scratching, not playful, not curious, desperate, clawing like something inside needed to be let out, or like he needed it gone. Claire watched him from the kitchen one evening, arms folded. "Radar," she said gently. "What is it, buddy?" The dog turned to her for half a second, eyes pleading, then returned to scratching. The sound echoed through the quiet house. When she mentioned it to Blake, he shrugged. "He's just being a dog," he said, flipping through a stack of real estate contracts at the dinner table. "Probably smells an old sandwich or something in there, or maybe my gym socks from 2008. Claire smiled politely, but it didn't sit right. Radar had never acted like this in their 3 years together, not even in the airport bomb sweep that earned him a medal. And this wasn't a normal distraction. It was more like a mission. That night, Radar stood by the suitcase for over 2 hours. No barking, no howling, just watching. The next morning, Claire recorded a short video. She sent it to her friend Kelsey, a former handler with the LAPD K-9 division. "Tell me if I'm crazy," she wrote. 10 minutes later, Kelsey called her, voice low. "Claire, that's alert behavior." "What do you mean?" "I mean, that's how they act when they've found narcotics or human remains." Claire laughed, but her stomach turned. "Kels, it's Blake's suitcase. I doubt there's a body in it. I'm just saying, dogs don't fake this stuff, especially ones like Radar." A few days later, Claire caught Blake standing over Radar with clenched fists. "Back off, mutt," he snapped. She rushed in. "Whoa, what's going on?" Blake stepped back quickly. "He almost tripped me. Keeps trying to knock over the speaker stack." Radar was silent now, but didn't move from the case. "He's just reacting to something. Maybe there's mold in there or old food. Or maybe it's time to send the dog to your mom's or a kennel or something, just for a few weeks." Claire stared at him. "Send him away? Why would I do that?" "I don't know," Blake said, suddenly smiling. "He just seems unstable lately." Claire crossed her arms. "Radar saved my life, twice. I trust him with everything." The tension hung heavy like someone had cut the air with a knife. The next day, Claire waited until Blake left for a property showing. She crouched next to the suitcase and whispered, "Okay, buddy, let's see what you're really after." Radar wagged his tail once, not joyfully, but like he was giving approval. Then he sat back, staring. Claire inspected the suitcase. Padlock, worn edges, a strip of duct tape along the seam. She used a butter knife to peel at the tape, but it didn't budge. Inside the office closet, she found a thin screwdriver. Carefully, she slid it under the latch. It gave a little. A sudden bang made her jump. It was Radar. He'd leapt to his feet and growled at the front window. Outside, Blake's car pulled into the driveway. Claire panicked. She shoved the tools back, slammed the closet shut, and tossed a blanket over the suitcase. Her heart thumped in her throat. Radar didn't stop growling until Blake walked through the door. And this time, Blake growled back. "Still at it, huh?" he muttered, brushing past both of them. Claire smiled tightly and said nothing. Later that night, Claire curled up with Radar on the porch. The cool Oregon air carried a trace of pine and distant smoke. She pressed her face into the old dog's fur and whispered, "What are you trying to tell me?" Radar looked up at her, then back at the door, then the suitcase. If you believe animals like Radar deserve their stories told, take a second to hit that subscribe button and support our channel, Heroes for Animals. These incredible dogs don't just save lives, they change them. Claire didn't sleep much that night. She kept picturing the old suitcase in the dark, the way Radar wouldn't let it go. The next morning, she took a different approach. She searched Blake's name in public databases. His full name, Blake Edward Carter. Realtor. Never arrested. No criminal record. But she noticed something strange in an old employment file. A legal name change. He'd been Blake Edward Crane until 7 years ago. Her fingers froze over the keyboard. She typed, Blake Edward Crane plus Oregon plus missing persons. The first result made her blood run cold. Lena Rojas. 22 years old. Disappeared 7 years ago. Last seen at a campus party in Eugene. Unsolved. Claire opened the article. Lena's photo stared back. Latina. Long dark curls. Bright eyes. A caption read, Friends last saw her leaving the party with a man named Blake Crane. Her hand trembled as she clicked the next link. A blog from Lena's sister. We never stopped looking, it read. We think he moved, changed his name, got away. Claire shut her laptop. Radar was scratching again. Not barking, not whining, just the same quiet, desperate sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The next morning, Claire didn't greet Blake with a kiss. She stood in the kitchen, hands tight around her coffee mug, Radar at her feet. The same article she'd read last night, about Lena Rojas and the man who left the party with her, was still burned into her brain. Blake Crane, not Carter. She couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't stop seeing Radar's claws scraping the same spot. Couldn't ignore how that silver suitcase suddenly felt like a loaded gun under the bed. Morning, Blake said, yawning as he walked in and kissed the top of her head. He didn't notice how she flinched. You sleep okay? She asked, trying to sound casual. Eventually, your dog's pacing didn't help. Radar didn't even look at him. Claire had the house to herself by 10. Blake said he was meeting a client in Bend, an hour away, and wouldn't be back till late afternoon. As soon as his car disappeared around the corner, she locked the front door and closed the blinds. Radar stood beside the suitcase. Okay, partner, she whispered, kneeling beside him. Let's find out what he's hiding. She brought out a box cutter and gloves. This time, she wasn't afraid. She felt something else. Determination. Like Radar had passed her the baton, and now it was her turn to run with it. She carefully slit the duct tape, revealing the latch underneath. Inside the suitcase was another box. This one made of steel, with a twisted combination lock built into the front. Claire stared at it for a long time. She didn't try to guess the combo. Instead, she backed away and grabbed her phone. Her fingers hovered over a number she hadn't dialed in a while. Detective Melissa Grant, her ex-cousin by marriage, and the only cop she trusted since her dad's death. Grant picked up on the second ring. Well, if it isn't Claire Adams, the voice came. Dry, sharp, always half amused. To what do I owe the surprise? Claire got straight to the point. I think I'm living with a man who may have killed someone, years ago, and my K9 just found the body. There was silence on the line for a moment. Where are you? Blake's house, near Sisters. Do not touch anything else. I'll be there in 3 hours. Claire sat on the couch with Radar while they waited. She kept glancing at the hallway. The office door was closed, but she could still picture the box, metal and heavy, sitting like a secret too loud to ignore. She remembered the first time she met Blake. How charming he'd been. The way he laughed at her dad jokes. The way he said her dog looked like he had stories. He did, and now he was telling one. By the time Detective Grant pulled into the driveway, Claire was pacing. The detective stepped out of her car in jeans, boots, and a faded flannel. No badge on display, no sirens, just that sharp look that could pin someone to the wall. Tell me everything, she said as she stepped inside. Claire did. From the first scratch to the badge she'd found, from Blake's alias to Lena's article. Grant listened without interrupting, only scribbling in her small leather notebook. Finally, they opened the suitcase together. Grant crouched, examined the box, then stood up. We'll need a proper warrant to open this legally. Claire's face dropped. But, Grant added, if you tell me you opened it before I got here, and I just happened to be documenting what you already found, that's something else. Claire blinked. You want me to open it? Grant shrugged. It's your house, and your box cutter. Claire nodded and kneeled down again. Radar watched from the doorway, tail still, body tense. Okay, she whispered, gripping the lock. She tried Blake's birth year. Nothing. Then Lena's. Still nothing. She stared at the dial and suddenly remembered. Their anniversary dinner. Blake had joked about it being the luckiest day of his life. April 3rd, 2017, 0403:1. She turned the dial. Click. The latch snapped free. Claire's stomach dropped as she lifted the lid. Inside were several black garbage bags, carefully folded. She pulled one open. The smell hit her first. Sweet, metallic, rotten. She dropped the flap and gagged. Grant moved quickly, pulling on gloves and snapping photos with her phone. Inside the layers of the bag were bones, clean but unmistakably human. One of them, the largest, had a gold nose ring looped around a fragment of what was once a skull. Grant exhaled slowly. "We'll get forensics here. Right now, we don't touch anything else." Claire backed away, pressing a hand to her mouth. "Is it her?" "We won't know until we match dental or DNA, but my gut says yes." They sealed the room. Grant called in a forensic team from Eugene under a quiet flag. No sirens, no gossip. Claire felt like she was walking through someone else's life. By dusk, the crew arrived, suited up, and carried out the box. Claire sat on the front steps with Radar. Her hands trembled as she ran them through his fur. "You knew," she whispered, "all this time." Radar leaned into her side, heavy and warm. That night, Blake came home later than usual. Claire didn't greet him. Grant was waiting in the living room with a plain folder and a badge now clipped to her belt. Blake walked in, saw the scene, and froze. "What's going on?" he asked, forcing a smile. "You tell me," Grant said. "You changed your name 7 years ago, right after Lena Rojas disappeared." Blake's face didn't move. "That's nonsense," he said calmly. "I had nothing to do with that. I've never even met—" "Then how do you explain her bones being in your house?" He went still. "Claire, whatever they're telling you—" Radar stepped between them and growled, not a bark, a deep guttural threat. Blake's hand twitched like he might run, but Grant was already moving. She stepped forward, cuffed him with a swift flick, and read him his rights like she'd done it 1,000 times. Blake didn't fight. He didn't even flinch. He just turned and looked at Claire. "I didn't want you to find it," he said quietly. When they drove off with him, Claire finally let the tears fall. Radar stayed beside her, head in her lap, as if refusing to leave until her heartbeat slowed. She looked at him, eyes swollen. "You didn't stop scratching," she whispered. "You never gave up." Claire hadn't slept in over 24 hours. The image of that steel box haunted her. The bone, the nose ring, the unmistakable shape of a human skull. It didn't matter how many times Detective Grant said, "You did the right thing." The truth sat like a rock in her chest. Her boyfriend, a man she'd loved, trusted, kissed goodnight, had been living a lie. And her dog, her old partner Radar, had known it all along. Claire sat on the porch swing that morning with a blanket draped over her shoulders. Radar lay at her feet, calm now as if the storm had passed. But inside Claire it hadn't. By mid-morning, reporters were already sniffing around. Someone had leaked something. A local news van crawled by her driveway, its antenna raised like a periscope. Claire ducked back into the house and drew the blinds. She called her job at the vet clinic and asked for a few days off. Her manager, Jenna, didn't ask questions, just said, "Take care of yourself, and Radar too." Claire hung up and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the grain in the wood like it might rearrange into answers. Around noon, a call came from a number she didn't recognize. "Claire Adams?" "Yes." "This is Officer Karen Voss with the Lane County Cold Case Unit. I wanted to speak with you about Lena Rojas." Claire's stomach nodded. "I've already talked to Detective Grant." "Of course," the officer said kindly. "We're coordinating, but I thought you should know. Lena's sister has been trying to reach you. I gave her your email. She's in California, but she asked if she could write." Claire hesitated. "That's okay. Yes, that's okay." She hung up, heart pounding. An email felt too real, too intimate. She wasn't sure she wanted to face someone whose entire life had been frozen in a moment, someone who'd waited 7 years for news she'd accidentally uncovered. The message came a few hours later. Subject, "Thank you. Dear Claire, I don't know you, but you found her. You found my sister. For 7 years, I've lived in silence while the world moved on. For 7 years, I carried around a photo of Lena in my wallet and asked every man who looked like him, 'Do I know you?' I didn't get justice, but you gave me peace. And your dog? That dog saved 2 families, yours and mine. Thank you, Rosa Rojas." Claire blinked hard. The tears came quietly this time. She called Radar to her side and just wrapped her arms around his neck. "You did that," she whispered. "You gave her back." Later that night, Detective Grant came by again. She wore jeans, a leather jacket, and the kind of face that had seen too many truths and too few answers. She didn't come in. just stood on the porch sipping coffee from a gas station cup. DNA came back fast, she said. Dental too, it's Lena, no question. Claire nodded slowly. We'll press charges by the end of the week. First-degree murder, concealment, probably abuse of a corpse. Claire flinched at the phrase. Grant looked away. I know it's ugly, but you did good. I feel sick. You're supposed to. That's how we know we're not them. The next day, Claire received a certified letter in the mail. Blake's power of attorney. Somehow, even from jail, he'd arranged for his lawyer to send her a key and a letter. She opened it on the porch with shaking hands. The letter was short. Claire, you were never supposed to find it. I buried that part of my life because it was easier. You brought it back. I don't hate you for it, but I wish you had looked away. Blake. Inside the envelope was a small, flat key with a worn plastic tag that read, Cabin, Elk Hollow. Claire stared at it. Blake had never mentioned a cabin. She called Detective Grant immediately. You up for a drive? Grant asked. Claire nodded. They reached Elk Hollow the next morning, a small plot of land deep in the Deschutes National Forest. Claire rode in Grant's SUV, radar in the back seat, head out the window like he was born to sniff the truth. The cabin was dusty, tucked behind rows of ponderosa pines. It didn't look lived in, but it wasn't forgotten either. A shed stood off to the side. The door hung slightly open. Grant approached first, hand on her holster. Claire stayed back with Radar, who stood stiff as stone beside her. Smells like bleach, Grant muttered, poking her head in. Inside were storage tubs, rolled carpets, and a stack of faded photo albums. Grant flipped one open. A picture of Blake and Lena on a hike, smiling. Another, Lena laughing beside a campfire. Another, her standing near the shed. The same shed. Claire swallowed hard. He brought her here, she whispered. This is where it started. Grant nodded. Probably where it ended, too. In the corner of the shed was a crate, wooden, carved with initials. Radar froze, then moved forward, tail low, ears high. He pressed his nose against the crate and whimpered. Just once. Claire stepped forward, ignoring Grant's raised hand. She crouched and lifted the lid. Inside was a small cloth pouch. She opened it. A necklace, a silver heart with the initials LR, and a charm shaped like a police badge. Claire gasped. That's hers, she whispered. Back at the station, Grant called it in. Forensics swept the shed, took photos, cataloged everything, but Claire knew what had just happened. The box Radar feared the most hadn't been steel. It had been memory. And now, finally, the last piece had come into the light. That night, Claire walked Radar to the small park near the high school. The air smelled like pine and quiet. She sat on a bench while Radar sniffed at the grass, tail swaying gently. The town was still asleep, unaware of what had just been uncovered in their own forest. She looked at Radar. You carried it all this time, she said. You knew, even when I didn't. Radar lay at her feet and rested his head on her boot. Good boy, she whispered. You found her. You brought her home. She leaned back, tears on her cheeks, and let the silence wrap around them both like a long overdue peace. By the end of the week, Claire Adams had become the center of a story she never meant to be part of. Local news called her a hero, a whistleblower, even a dog mom who cracked a cold case. But Claire didn't feel like any of those things. She wasn't a detective. She hadn't been trained to uncover murder or decode lies. She had simply listened to a dog who wouldn't stop scratching and to a gut feeling that something was very, very wrong. On Monday morning, the district attorney held a press conference on the courthouse steps. Claire didn't attend, but she watched the live stream from her kitchen table, Radar by her side as usual. His fur brushed against her legs as she poured her coffee. We have officially filed charges, the DA said firmly. Blake Edward Carter, formerly Blake Edward Crane, is being charged with the murder of Lena Rojas. Evidence recovered from his residence and secondary property confirms premeditation and concealment. The DA adjusted her glasses and looked straight into the camera. We want to thank the citizen who came forward, and the retired K-9 whose instincts never failed. Radar tilted his head at the sound of his name. Claire reached down and scratched behind his ears. Yeah, she murmured. They're talking about you. Later that day, Claire received a call from a number she almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Hello? Ms. Adams, this is Martin Wells. I'm an assistant producer with Real Truth Investigates. It's a national docuseries on cold cases. We'd like to fly you to Los Angeles for a sit-down interview. We're doing a segment titled Buried in the Pines. Claire's stomach flipped. I'm not interested in doing interviews right now, she said quickly. We understand, but we'd love to highlight the role your dog played. This isn't just a murder story as all, it's a survival story, a loyalty story, about a bond between a woman and her dog. That part gave her pause. I'll think about it, she said, but she didn't call back. Because deep down, Claire wasn't sure she wanted the whole country peering into her life like it was a Netflix thriller. Meanwhile, the police continued searching Blake's digital records. Detective Grant called on Wednesday with a hollow tone in her voice. We found more, she said. Claire's heart sank. More what? More aliases, more dating profiles. Same photo, different names, all scrubbed, all linked to women who filed missing persons reports later. We're pulling together timelines now. Lena might not have been the only one. Claire sat on the edge of her couch, dizzy. How is that even possible? Men like him, Grant said softly. They don't usually stop. Claire walked to the closet and pulled down an old storage bin. Inside was Radar's service vest. The navy blue one with the faded patch. K-9 unit, retired but still protecting. She ran her fingers over it, thinking about all the times she'd leaned on that dog. After her dad's funeral, through every breakup during the pandemic lockdowns. He was more than a pet. He was her partner. She clipped the vest on and whispered, You ready to go to work again, buddy? Radar stood tall, as if he understood. They drove to the police station together and walked through the front doors like old pros. Grant met them in the lobby. Back for round 2? She said, offering Radar a soft smile. Come on, I've got something to show you. In the back room, Grant laid out a series of printed photos on the table. All women. All brunette. All with similar builds to Lena. Next to each was a printed alias Blake had used. Mark R., Evan Crane, David L., and more. These women, Grant said. Some of them are still missing, but a few were found alive. Said he ghosted them, got paranoid and ran. It lines up with what we know. He was careful, but not perfect. Claire studied the faces. That one, she said suddenly, pointing to a photo. I've seen her. Where? She commented on one of Blake's old Instagram photos. Something about a cabin. She called it our hideaway. Grant's eyes sharpened. You still have that post? I might. Claire pulled up Blake's old page, now flooded with angry comments, and scrolled to a picture of a lake. The caption read, Peace and Pine Trees. The woman had written, Miss this place. I still think about it sometimes. Her name was listed as Tracy R. Grant took a photo of the screen. We'll track her down. Maybe she knows something we don't. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, Radar curled beside her like a stone sentry. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of Lena. Not the gruesome parts. Just a girl smiling in the woods, holding Radar's leash, as if she had never vanished at all. The next morning, Claire woke to a knock on her front door. Rosa Rojas stood outside, clutching a travel bag and a manila envelope. Claire blinked. You came. I had to, Rosa said softly. I needed to meet the woman, and the dog, who brought my sister home. They hugged on the porch like they'd known each other for years. Radar sniffed Rosa's hand and then gently leaned into her side. He remembers, Claire whispered. Inside, they sat over coffee while Rosa opened the envelope. She wrote letters, Rosa said, laying out several pages. Lena always journaled. I saved them. There's one here. It's dated a few weeks before she vanished. Claire picked up the page. Lena's handwriting danced across the paper. I met someone. His name's Blake, but something about him feels off. He changes stories halfway through. I don't know. Maybe I'm paranoid. But if anything ever happens to me, I want Rosa to have this. Claire closed her eyes. She tried to warn someone, Rosa whispered, and no one was listening until your dog. Radar lifted his head as if on cue. That afternoon, they drove together to Lena's newly marked gravesite. Just a small stone, a fresh patch of earth, flowers tucked into the soil. Claire stood back as Rosa knelt. Radar sat beside them both, quiet, still, his chest rising with slow breaths. She's home now, Rosa said. Claire nodded. Because of him. That evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line and lit the sky with orange and gold, Claire posted a photo online. It was of Radar, sitting on her porch in his vest, the wind catching his ears just right. The caption read, He never stopped scratching until the truth was out. The courthouse smelled like old carpet and nerves. Claire sat stiff-backed on the wooden bench, Radar curled beside her feet in his service vest. His badge-shaped patch shimmered faintly under the hallway lights, retired, not forgotten. It had been 3 months since Blake's arrest. Now the trial was starting. Not in the media, not in whispers, not in Claire's nightmares, but for real. With jurors, a judge, a podium, and a defense team still trying to paint Blake Carter as the victim of misunderstanding. Claire wasn't buying it. Neither was Radar. Inside the courtroom, Rosa Rojas sat 1 row up, her knuckles white as she clutched a folded photo of her sister. A silver chain, the same one recovered from the cabin, now hung around her neck, the charm gently tapping against her collarbone like a heartbeat. The prosecutor, a woman named Dana Keller, was the kind of voice you couldn't ignore. Calm, direct, but with a current of steel under her words. She stood before the jury and laid it bare. This case is not about speculation. It is about pattern, about lies, and about a man who, when faced with exposure, chose silence over justice. But justice caught up. She gestured to Blake, and it came in the form of a German shepherd who never gave up. A few jurors glanced down at Radar, who lay still at Claire's feet. He didn't blink. Blake looked different behind the defendant's table. Gone was the charming boyfriend with the perfect smile and tailored shirt sleeves. In his place sat a man in a blue county-issued suit, jaw tight, eyes colder than Claire had ever seen them. He hadn't tried to speak to her since the arrest. Not in court, not through lawyers, not even through that pathetic letter with the cabin key. It didn't matter, because Claire had heard all she needed, and what she hadn't heard, Radar had smelled. One of the early witnesses was Detective Grant. She took the stand in her plain blazer and crisp voice, walking the jury through the entire investigation. From Claire's first call, to the hidden suitcase, to the bones found in Blake's house. Then came the cabin, and then the name change. Did the defendant ever provide a reason for the name change? The prosecutor asked. Grant nodded once. He claimed it was to avoid a toxic ex-girlfriend, but no records support that. And the timing aligns directly with the disappearance of Lena Rojas. And what was recovered from the cabin? A silver pendant with Lena's initials, several photographs of the two of them together, handwritten notes that suggest a relationship. Any evidence of other victims? We've identified at least 4 other women he dated under different names. 2 went missing and have not been located. Gasps murmured through the room. The judge banged his gavel gently. Silence in the gallery. Then came Claire's turn. She stood, legs trembling just slightly, and took the oath. Radar waited just outside the rail, eyes never leaving her. On the stand, Claire walked them through everything. The scratching, the suitcase, the badge she found, the hesitation, the moment she finally opened it. The prosecutor leaned forward. Why didn't you walk away? Claire looked at the jury. Because I've seen my dog alert on bombs, on blood, on hidden compartments. But I've never seen him react like that. He was scared. Not for himself. For me. He was warning me. And when you realized what it might be, I got help. I didn't want to believe it, but I trusted Radar more than I trusted my own instincts. And he was right. The defense tried to shake her. The lawyer, a tall man with silver hair and a polite voice, paced the floor. Ms. Adams, you stated that the dog led you to the suitcase. But isn't it possible your interpretation of his behavior was emotionally driven? A projection? No, Claire said firmly. He was trained to signal danger. He did. I listened. Couldn't he have been reacting to something else? A dead animal, even mold? Claire's jaw tightened. Radar served 2 tours overseas. He's tracked human scent buried under rubble. He knows the difference. The lawyer changed tactics. Is it true you and the defendant were in a romantic relationship? Yes. So isn't it possible you had a motive? That you were angry? That this was revenge? Claire let out a breath. I wasn't angry, she said. I was scared. But Radar wasn't. He was focused, and he never ever scratched at anything he wasn't trained to identify. He knew. After she stepped down, Radar rose and followed her back to the bench. The jury watched him, not like a pet, but like a silent witness. Because in a way, he was. The trial stretched into the next week. Then came the surprise witness. The prosecutor called Tracy Romero, one of the women found during the investigation. Claire recognized her immediately from the old Instagram post. Miss this place. I still think about it sometimes. Tracy took the stand, voice shaking at first, but growing stronger with every sentence. He said his name was David, she began. We met through a hiking app. He was charming. Knew the area well. Took me to a cabin near El Calo. The courtroom leaned in. He brought me wine. Told me I was safe with him. But one night he locked the door from the outside. Gasps again. I left the next morning while he was still asleep. Something told me to run. Later, I saw a missing person poster, and the man in it looked just like him. And did you report this? I was scared. I thought maybe I was imagining things, until I saw the news. Her eyes found Claire in the gallery. You weren't the only one he fooled. By Friday, the jury was visibly shaken. The judge instructed them carefully. On Monday morning, they returned. Guilty. On all counts. Claire didn't cry. She just held Radar's head in her hands, forehead pressed to his, and whispered, "We did it." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. But Claire said only one thing, her voice steady over the mic. "I didn't solve this case. My dog did. I just listened." She looked down at Radar, who sat beside her like a statue. And I think Lena heard him too. That night, Claire and Rosa met at the lake near the old cabin. There were no cameras, no speeches, just a lantern floating on the water, carrying a single white rose and a silver badge charm. "Goodbye, sis," Rosa whispered. Radar watched the light drift across the water, then sat quietly, as if keeping vigil. Back home, Claire printed the verdict headline and tucked it into a small frame beside Radar's medals. On the back, she wrote one sentence. He never stopped scratching, and he never gave up. Radar's final medal came in a velvet box lined with navy blue satin, tucked inside a wooden case etched with gold lettering, "For bravery and service, Oregon State Honor Commendation." The ceremony was small, just Claire, Detective Grant, Rosa, a few local officers, and a city councilwoman who teared up halfway through her speech. The councilwoman knelt in front of Radar, who now walked with a slight limp from arthritis. She ran a hand gently over his fur. "They say not all heroes wear badges," she said, voice thick with emotion. "But this one? He wore his twice." That night, back home, Claire placed the medal beside Radar's service vest. She'd cleaned and brushed it that morning, carefully reattaching the retired canine patch. She traced the lettering with her fingers. Retired, not forgotten. Then she looked at Radar, resting peacefully in his bed by the fireplace. "You did good, partner," she whispered. "You did real good." 6 months had passed since the verdict. Blake Carter, or rather, Blake Crane, had been sentenced to life in prison without parole. 3 more women had come forward after the trial, one from Arizona, another from Washington, and one from as far as New Jersey. All of them shared the same story. A charming man, a remote place, a sudden chill in his eyes. Only Lena hadn't made it home, but because of Radar, her truth had. Claire had changed too. She left her job at the vet clinic and started working part-time with a local trauma support group, specifically helping women who'd survived abusive relationships or coercive control. She didn't talk about her story unless someone asked. But Radar, he came with her to every meeting. The women loved him. He'd sit by their feet, quiet and warm, never pushing, just there. Solid. A presence. One girl, barely 20, with bruises that weren't all physical, looked at Radar one day and whispered, "He doesn't need to talk, does he?" Claire smiled gently. "No, he just knows." One fall evening, Rosa visited again. The trees were turning amber and rust, and the light through Claire's windows painted everything gold. They sat on the porch swing with mugs of cider while Radar dozed in a patch of sunlight, chin on his paws. "I keep thinking," Rosa said softly, "if he hadn't scratched that suitcase." "He would have found another way," Claire replied. "He was trying long before I was ready to see it." Rosa nodded. "You ever think dogs remember more than we give them credit for?" Claire looked at Radar, sleeping peacefully. "I know they do." A few weeks later, Radar had a hard time standing up one morning. His legs trembled. His breathing was shallow. Claire carried him to the car and drove straight to the vet. Not the clinic where she used to work, but the one she trusted most. The vet ran tests, took scans, then sat down with gentle eyes and a tired smile. "It's time," he said softly. Claire nodded, tears already sliding down her cheeks. She held Radar's head in her lap, whispering to him, telling him how much he meant to her, to Lena's family, to everyone. He looked up at her once, slow and soft, and then he let go. The house felt impossibly quiet afterward. No claws on the hardwood floor, no deep breaths by the couch, no scratches against hidden secrets. Claire kept his collar on the mantel, and the suitcase, the one that started it all, was donated to a police training facility in Eugene. A symbolic piece now, used to teach new handlers the power of a dog's persistence. A month after Radar's passing, Claire received a large envelope in the mail. Inside was a leather-bound guest book filled with handwritten letters. At the top, a printed note, to Radar, the dog who wouldn't let her be forgotten. There were notes from strangers, K-9 officers, survivors, even kids. One read, "You didn't know my mom, but you saved her anyway. Zoe, age 11. Another, "I saw your story while I was going through a bad relationship. You gave me the courage to leave. Thank you. Carly M." Claire sat on the floor, hugging the book to her chest, sobbing in gratitude. Months passed. The snow came, then melted. Spring brought wildflowers to the edge of the lake by Elk Hollow, the place where Radar had sniffed out the last piece of Lena's memory. Claire returned there with Rosa and a few friends on the one-year anniversary of the verdict. They brought a small plaque with them, nothing flashy, just truth carved into wood. "Here," Justice barked. And someone finally listened. In memory of Lena Rojas and Radar, the dog who remembered. They buried it beneath a young pine tree and said nothing for a long time. No speeches, no music, just the breeze and the whisper of pine needles and the rustle of something bigger than grief. Back home that evening, Claire looked through an old photo album. Page after page of Radar's life, curled at her feet on rainy days, nose deep in snowdrifts, wearing a birthday hat that one year she made cupcakes shaped like bones. She paused on one photo, Radar in his vest, standing alert beside the suitcase, eyes locked forward. He had known. He had always known. Before bed, she sat down at her desk and wrote a letter to the city council. She didn't want a statue, not a mural, but she wanted a program, something to honor K-9 dogs like Radar, something that trained, supported, and retired them with dignity, something that reminded people that not all heroes walk on two legs. The next month, the city approved Radar's Law, a local ordinance ensuring retired K-9s receive medical care and housing support. His legacy lived on. And now maybe it lives through this story, too, because some truths don't whisper. They scratch, they growl, they wait patiently at locked doors until someone, somewhere, finally turns the key. Thank you for following the full story of Claire and Radar, their bond, their bravery, and their quiet fight for justice. Remind us that sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones that don't speak at all. What would you have done if your dog wouldn't stop scratching the same suitcase? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more true, inspiring stories about animals who refuse to be ignored.